This might be the most talking I have ever done in a day.
I believe
I've just
it.
been talking and talking and talking.
And now you're going to get me talking some more.
Yep.
If you want.
Fortunately, this is the Camera Gear podcast.
Therefore, it's an 80-20 split on who talks the most.
Yes. And I'm in the minority.
I mean, I don't know if you've been reading the comments, but I just keep seeing more Daniel, please.
That's not what I see, you know. But I did see somebody say that they want a post show.
Yeah.
And they said that our podcast right now is like an open face sandwich.
They did. I actually put this in here as the pre-show, which talk about the post show. And I thought that was maybe a good signifier of what we call in the industry scope creep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I worry, not for myself, mostly for you, that if we added a post show, then we would ultimately end up with a post show. And since sometimes there might be a post show, and can you imagine if we had like 2 pre-shows and 3 post shows in a show? The show would hardly be a show. The show would be like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think it would either that or it would double the length of the podcast, which both of those sound undesirable.
Yep. So I mean, we could always try it at some point, but it's a risk.
I mean, my thing is, I think open face sandwich is pretty good. I mean, you need like a fork and a spoon, a fork and a knife to really consume them.
I ordered a chili burger once, and I was like, I like green chilies. Put green chilies on my hamburger, and I got a burger with it was like no top bun and smothered in chili, like Texas chili with beans and ground beef, the whole 9 yards.
I think you misunderstood that menu item.
Yeah, they tried to explain to me. They're like, no, you don't understand. This is open face with chili on it. I'm like, I don't know what you mean.
And now you do know what they mean.
And now I do.
Yep. Yeah. How'd you eat that burger?
With a fork.
Probably the right move.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you just get your hands in there and just go for it, or what the deal is.
Maybe. I mean, do you want to maybe like talk about other kinds of good open face sandwiches while we're here?
I mean, a Philly
is chicken and waffles an open face sandwich?
It has to be. How would you close it?
I mean, it's waffles, basically bread. Chicken.
What about a Philly cheesesteak? Does that count?
I mean, like you kind of fold it over. Like it's more of a sub.
I guess so. Yeah.
Sure. Pizza could be open face calzone.
That's true. Or is a calzone just a closed pizza?
I feel like people would get mad either way, and we should just go ahead and redact that.
Yeah, probably
cut this part out.
That's what I need. I need a censor beat.
You really do.
Oh man, it's probably good that I don't have that. I'd have way too much fun.
That'd be too good.
Yep.
Okay. I need to get into some of these other topics.
Hold on. Did you notice a few weeks ago when you were talking about chapter art? Chapter markers for the pre-shows. Mm-hmm. When you watched that episode, did you look at the chapters?
Oh, yeah. I noticed that you did go ahead and mark the pre-shows, but you didn't successfully mark the pre-show. You only marked the pre-show. You missed the pre-show.
I messed it up.
Yeah. I was like, it's funny that Daniel did this, but he did it wrong.
I guess you didn't communicate him clearly enough.
I didn't have the heart to tell you.
I think you're just not being clear enough about what is the pre-show and what is the pre-show.
Well, I mean, what's even more clear is I've already self-identified this previous segment as a pre-show, but you've already added another segment, which means the previous segment is short one pre.
And now you wonder why I got it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we're all over the place.
All right. Well, okay. let's move on.
Let's get back on track.
Okay.
Into what I like to call foreshadowing. If you had a camera company, Daniel, what would you name it?
I wasn't prepared to answer this type of question today. That's tough.
Would you name it like Dan Cam?
I don't think I would. I don't think that's what would have come to mind.
You don't think that's like a portmanteau of your name and camera wouldn't be like the best way to do it?
Do you think
what about Danera?
What if I called it D-Cam? You think people would get it confused with Z-Cam?
That's pretty good though.
Yeah.
Like it could both be digital camera and Daniel camera.
Yeah, and also like you're filming an interview and you want it to have a really high production value.
Sure,
you've got 4 cameras.
Yeah,
you've got your A cam, B cam,
come on,
C cam, and your D cam.
Skip all the other ones. Yeah.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
I'm just going to move all these other pre-shows to next week.
Can you imagine the chaos if you were able to reach these sound buttons that I have over here?
It'd be out of control.
Because I was just thinking it'd be funny if we both had that. And I said, no, we don't both need to have access to that. It's too much.
What you have to do is instead make it like a driver thing where, like just student drivers.
Oh, where you've got like a slave. We can't use that word anymore, but you have a secondary steering wheel attached to the primary,
or more like where. Like if you have like a kid next to you and they want to pretend like they're driving, but it's like a fake wheel.
Oh, it's like when you give your little brother the PlayStation controller, but it's not plugged in.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I could have my own buttons over here, but they don't do anything.
They only play sound in your headphones.
Yeah. They like light up something on your end so you know I'm pressing them.
That's a good idea. I like that idea.
I have all the power. No. Not even close. Oh, boy. All right. So Sony released more firmware.
They did.
Yeah.
They're not even the only company that released firmware in the past week.
Who else released firmware?
Panasonic, man. S5 Mark II got some new firmware.
What'd they do?
They added new frame guides. So you can customize frame guides. Like if you want to have a vertical 16:9.
Didn't they announce that and then like roll it out for the S9 or something, and then everyone complained it wasn't on the other cameras?
That does sound a little familiar. I don't know if that was this. It might have been this, but regardless, they put that on their cameras, and I think it had some other stuff in it. But that was the feature I thought was pretty cool.
Did they add camera authenticity?
No, they're very, very inauthentic cameras.
Oh, that's true. Mm-hmm. Sony did, and that's like the main thing for this update.
We've talked about that in a previous episode, I think. With some of the other cameras.
Yeah, so like we're going to talk about Leica and Pentax today, and Leica has been on the forefront of doing the camera authenticity stuff, and they do it via hardware. Mm-hmm. Sony isn't a part of the whatever you call it consortium or group that is running that standard.
Okay,
but they have opted to roll it out to their camera, and like they're going to call it like camera authenticity or something, and it's the A9 III, the A1, and the A1 Mark II. Which will have these firmware updates so that, and it's like most like your journalist type cameras, so you can have the, this is an original image and it's not AI modified, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's, it's not a very exciting feature to talk about, but I just feel like stuff like that is going to become important with the way the world is now.
Yeah, I think it's going to become more and more important, and it's good to see manufacturers get on board with it.
Yeah.
It feels like the adoption has been slow. I know that Nikon's committed to it, Leica's committed to it, and it's nice to see that Sony has at least added it to their high-end cameras.
For sure. Yeah. Anytime Sony adds any feature to their existing cameras, it's a day of celebration.
Yeah, I saw this come through, and I'm like, boy, can't not talk about it.
Yeah.
This is huge.
Clearly.
First time this year.
Yeah. Amazing. They made it a whole 28 days. I can't date this podcast.
That's fine.
An undefined number of days.
Undefined number of days. Some amount of days. The blah, 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 blah. I bought a new camera thing.
And it's something that fits on the lens mount of your camera, which means it kind of counts as a lens.
It has a lens in it.
Yep. So you have more lenses now.
But like, it's just going to live on my other lens. But it may cause me to buy more lenses.
It's a lens for your lens.
Yeah, it's a lens for my lens. That's exactly right. I bought a M42 screw mount focal reducer from China for like $60.
That sounds like a pretty good deal. What was the reason that you needed that?
So you gave me a Helios 44-2, which is 58 millimeter f2 Russian swirly boy that was one of our first legendary lenses.
Yeah, it was.
And
do you remember the circumstances in which I gave you that lens? Because I still think that's funny.
Didn't you give it to me on this podcast?
I didn't give it to you on the podcast. You and I were shooting an event, and I borrowed your camera to do something.
Oh, that's right.
And I can't remember whether I put it in your bag or if I had it on the camera.
It's one of those things.
It was one of those things.
I was very
confused. I didn't tell you I was doing it, and you were very confused when you saw it.
That lens is very fun.
Yep. But you don't use it very much.
I don't use it very much. And a part of the reason is most of the character from that lens occurs around the edges. And I don't feel like I'm getting the most out of it because I'm shooting a crop sensor camera.
It's a full frame lens, and you're shooting it on a crop sensor camera.
Right, yeah, because it was originally for 35 millimeter film. Mm-hmm. And so I bought a focal reducer, essentially a speed booster, to get more of the image circle onto my camera sensor when shooting on my Fuji.
Now, what was the aperture of that lens?
f2.
So focal reducer probably takes it down a stop. So does it take it to 1.4?
Probably. I mean, I'm not really putting the numbers to this because I'm sure like it focuses.
That's impressive, honestly.
when I turn the thing to focus and it's like the red lines to show you whether or not it's in focus on the camera, that is accurate. And so I'm getting accurate manual focus, which I was not expecting. I was like, I'm gonna have to like tweak the diopters or something in order to get this, because speed whistles are always like that. And I was like, I'm buying this thing for pennies on the dollar. It's gonna ship on some cargo ship, and who knows what I'm gonna get. I don't know. It seems to be exactly what I wanted, which is like some cheap, dumb piece of glass. And I'm putting it on this swirly lens that's already painfully soft. And it's not painfully soft, it's just soft.
I mean, really, that focal reducer is just adding more character to the lens.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. What I explained to my wife is that something that I've said on this podcast more than once, that the vibes are inversely proportional to the image quality.
That's true.
And so when adding that focal reducer, I have improved the vibes of that lens.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it seems to be exactly what I wanted. I'm getting more of the swirliness on the outside, and now I want to do some night photography or something with that, because I think it'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad now you can get more use out of it.
Yeah, one of the things I could do is buy more M42 screw mount lenses.
Oh, even better.
I've also considered that I should buy an M42 mount film camera.
Yeah.
So now I can like expand upon this this roll of lenses in my life.
Can you adapt that M42 lens to something like your AE1? Does the AE1 have a changeable lens?
The AE1 is a bayonet mount. And it's an SLR as well. M42 is an SLR mount.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to really convert that in the same way, I don't think.
I see.
I could probably look to see. I don't know what the flange distance is on, what is it, FE mount versus M42. I could look and see. It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I should look into that. What if I could adapt it?
It'd be pretty cool.
I don't want to have to buy another camera. But
You wouldn't get to buy another camera.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. I wouldn't get to buy another camera. If I bought another lens for M42, there is more M42 legendary lenses on our list.
Oh, really?
I could get the Carl Zeiss Ultron 50mm 1.8.
Is that the same as what you have in this note here, which is the Carl Zeiss Ultron 50mm 1.8? Because that sounds like something from mythology.
That's
not a legendary lens; it's a mythical lens.
Yeah, that's the knockoff version. I don't have Carl Zeiss money.
Doesn't
I only have Carl Zeiss money?
Doesn't Carl Zeiss sound like, I don't know, some kind of like low budget superhero?
It's very good. I actually have a Kickstarter, and I'm gonna go ahead and create copies of all the Carl Zeiss lenses, but they're Carl Zeiss lens. Yep. Mm-hmm. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a lot of money because people don't read. They just skim.
Yep. They think it's just an autocorrect mistake.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Oh man, they got a Carl Zeiss Ultron lens here for only $200. Man, these are going for like $500 on eBay. I gotta scoop this puppy up. Nope. That's Carl Zeiss.
Carl gets you again.
Carl got you again. Oh boy. Okay. I have one item that is not follow-up from our previous podcast.
And we certainly didn't make a mistake.
No.
By no means.
We were talking about the 500mm 5.6 lens category.
Mm-hmm. As I recall, I think I was pretty down on it, and you were saying it's a great lens. I was one of the best lenses.
Yep, super on top of it. And I was like, this is where the train stops as far as, prime, like long, fast primes, and generally like 500mm at 5.6 is about as good as you're going to get.
Yeah.
And I forget that, like,
there are a lot of lenses out there.
Modern mirrorless lenses have gotten really stinking good and have gotten pretty fast. Yep. And so I made an enormous list here of lenses that I would consider fall within the category of what I was considering like this 500mm 5.6 like lens category that we were putting into our tier list. And I want to kind of run through some of those lenses so that people are not like, boy, Lucas forgot all these lenses exist. This is me telling you, I now know that they exist.
I mean, I can't imagine how many emails we've already gotten about these, but I guess now's your chance to get out in front of it.
I'm just thinking if I can talk about it this week, that's like, an eternity less emails, and we'll only have like 1 week of email.
Yeah.
and then it'll be fine.
That's true. All right. Hit us.
So, and some of these are pretty good. Like, maybe Luke should switch to full frame. No, that's not gonna happen.
I mean, you just bought that focal reducer. You're pretty deep in crop sensors.
Just so deep. If I took a kiddie pool and I filled it with all my lenses, knee deep at least.
Knee deep in lenses. Another good name for this episode if we were to name our episodes.
Yeah. So Nikon makes, for the Z mount, they make a 400 millimeter f2.8.
Pretty dang fast.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty good. They also make a 600 f4 and an 800 6.3.
Okay.
And then Canon and Sony are not to be left out. They also make a 400 millimeter 2.8s. And then they also, I was like, wait, and those are faster. No, they make 600 millimeter f4s as well.
Mm-hmm.
So from all three of the big brands, you can get 600 and 400 in a pretty quick speed, faster than 5.6.
And then Canon even has 800 f5.6, which is faster than the Nikon 800.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the entrance people on that 800 5.6 is going to be pretty wild. That lens is also like $12,000. All of these lenses are wildly expensive.
I was about to ask about that. Like, is the reason we don't talk about these because they're kind of in that unattainably expensive sort of category?
Oh yeah, they're definitely up there. I think that the cheapest one will probably be the Nikon 400 millimeter 2.8. I think that one's like $12,000,
yeah,
$13,000, something like that.
That's pretty high. That's like you're getting paid to shoot.
It's like brand new though. Maybe we can find it for cheaper. Let's see, B&H.
Like if you get the one that's actually been in a kiddie pool, that would probably be a little bit cheaper.
Oh, this one's on sale. It's $1,000 off for $12,996.95 USD. Anyway,
you said a lot of numbers there, but $1,000 off is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Canon makes an 800 f11 that's like $1,000 or something.
Yeah, that one's like the cheap one, right?
Yeah, but that's not what I was talking about though. We're talking about kind of like this 800 5.6, 600 f4, which are all like way better than a 500 5.6. So with that in mind, do you want to move this up in a rank?
I still stand by what I said last week, which is that lenses like this, to me, are kind of incapable of having a super high rank because they're so expensive. Because, I mean, on one hand, I could say, like, well, it's a great lens. It doesn't matter how much it costs. But, I mean, to me, like, part of what makes a lens great is that it's, a good price to performance ratio. And as good as these could possibly be, it's just a $12,000 lens is not something that, like, it would have to live up to more than it can live up to for me to really think it's great.
So you're saying a 600 millimeter f4 optically stabilized G Master lens, it does not have the same price to functionality ratio as a 70 to 200 f2.8 that's $3,500?
Yes, exactly. And then there's no 70 to 200 that's $3,500. They're all cheaper than that.
They're all cheaper than $3,500?
I think so. Mm-hmm. The most expensive one I've seen is $3,000, which is the Canon hybrid video one.
But isn't the collapsible one more expensive, or do they reduce that one in price?
I think it's under $3,000. I think it's like $2,800 or something.
Canon RF 70 to 200 lens. No, yes, $25.99.
Yeah, it's like a bargain.
Man, that's gonna be. I'm not looking forward to paying for that when I switch to R mount or F mount. Sorry. Okay. Let's get to the meat of this episode, Daniel, because we said we still have a post show to do. We started this whole camera series thing where we're doing camera brands, and I think that the last one we did was in May.
Yeah, that was like a year ago, Lucas. Come on.
I couldn't even tell you the episode numbers. I don't think we crossed 100 episodes at that point in time. We got to close the thread, in the loop, however you want to say it, and we're going to cover both Nikon and Pentax in this episode.
We talked about Nikon. We're not talking about Nikon.
Oh, did I say Nikon?
You did.
Dang it. I wanted to talk about Nikon.
Gotcha.
Shoot. Let me pull up my other notes here.
Yeah, I just prepared this whole episode.
We're talking about Leica, and we're going to talk about Pentax.
Okay. That sounds more appropriate.
Doesn't it? Okay. So, do you know where the name Leica comes from?
I do not.
You don't?
I don't know much about Leica. I know that they're one of the, I would say Leica is like one of the more like historical camera brands, I guess. Like, I definitely think they have an older history than many of the others, but I really don't know much about them besides that their cameras are really expensive and really hipster.
So they started in 1925. This is their 100-year anniversary.
Wow.
And they were founded
Timing.
by...
That's why we waited to do this episode, Lucas.
Yeah, obviously. They were founded by Ernst Leitz. Leitz.
Okay. I feel like I've heard that name.
Do you see where I'm going here?
Not exactly. You're going to have to connect these dots for me.
Do you remember earlier when I was talking about foreshadowing?
I do. Mm-hmm.
It's a portmanteau of his last name and the word camera. Leitzka.
Well,
it is literally Dan Cam.
Okay. Literally Dan Cam.
Yep.
Another good episode title.
I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I was like, oh yeah, cool, that's fun and clever. And then I thought about it for a minute. I'm like, sure, lights, camera. Like, sure, you want to name your company after your last name. That makes sense. I get it. I get it. But also, like, I can't help but portmanteau a lot of words together. And I know it's kind of like maybe like a tick or a problem.
Yeah.
Or like what do you call it? Not like a social condition, like a mental condition. I don't know. There's something wrong with me.
You definitely have some mental conditions, so I could see that.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, apparently the founder of Leica suffered from the same problems that I do.
Sounds like it. Yep.
Me and Ernst Leitz are the same.
2 peas in a pod.
Yep. Both have German names. Both are into cameras. Both like portmanteaus.
Yeah. That's a lot of coincidence.
Yep. Just gonna let that one hang there for a minute.
Yep. So that's the episode.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Anyways, so Leica. I don't necessarily want to get into the whole history of Leica, but I do want to talk about kind of like their camera line and maybe some rumors for this year and where are they going and the brand as a whole.
Yeah, I think that kind of matches what we did for the other brands.
Yeah, and like Leica's what do you say about it, right? They are the premium. They're like the premium brand.
Yeah.
I feel like we all kind of have a good grasp of where they sit in the market and like where they try to be as a camera brand. Mm-hmm. I always feel like if you take a step back and you go back to, pre-2000s Leica, maybe, peak Leica from the 50s to the 90s, or not even the 90s, like before the SLR. Whenever it's like, wow, Leica is like making these amazing lenses and look at these rangefinder cameras and look at this innovative design on how they do their focus system whenever you can't like see through and do an SLR. And they had basically like perfected this system and they're like so good at optics. And it's like, okay, it makes sense why you're going to spend all this money on a Leica camera. And then like SLRs happened and it seemed like they kind of lost a little bit of what made them special because now it's like, oh, everyone has solved this problem in a better way than the way this more complicated way that Leica solved it. And then once we get into the digital era, now it's like all about tech specs and what these cameras can do. And if you look at a modern Canon, Nikon, or Sony, they are better spec-wise than any Leica you can buy.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the question that you may have when you first look at Leica's cameras is what justifies the price? Is it just the name or what, what sets this apart? Why would I spend this much money on a camera?
It's not the technology. Their technology is often behind. I think that almost every camera in their lineup, barring like the M6 or the Deluxe or the Sofort, basically like the M11 and the Q and the SL series all share that 60.3 megapixel A7R4 sensor.
Yeah.
And like that's the sensor they've just been putting in their cameras. And it's a great sensor and you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. But it's like they're not, pushing the edge on these sensors.
Yeah.
And it's like if you just want the raw file off the sensor, it kind of doesn't matter what camera you use. But if you care about build quality or weather resistance or like lens and optics and having like the best experience of using the camera, that's where Leica excels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like the lens, for example, is something that would be really easy to discount because you could look at something like a Leica Q3 and you look at the price, you look at the megapixels, and it's pretty easy to think, why wouldn't I just get a Sony A7R4, has the same sensor, throw a lens on there and I'm good. And yeah, one thing that is missing is that Leica's lenses are really good.
Yeah, and it comes down to the experience as far as like all the things that they consider when they're making these lenses, and like the focus nub and all this stuff, and how the M11 is a manual focus only camera on purpose, and it has built-in storage, and the Q3 wirelessly charges when you set it on a pad, and most of their cameras have built-in internal storage. It's like Leica does all these things for that improve like the user experience to try to make it, I don't know, it's kind of like seamless in a way. I do wonder how many Leica shooters are actually editing RAW files.
Yeah, that's a good question, because another thing people talk about with Leica is their colors, right? So it makes me think of Canon, for example, where I guess you don't hear as much anymore, but people definitely kind of feel like, oh, I like a Canon for the colors. And, meanwhile, you can get a RAW and do whatever you want to it. But some people really like the JPEG processing of certain cameras.
For sure. As a Fuji shooter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it's interesting what Leica does. I do appreciate like the cameras that they do make in Germany still, which is, most of their major ones. And I think that a lot of us are like, think of Leica as this, brand of like, oh, one day I'll own a Leica.
Yeah.
And I think that's just where they sit, and they just kind of don't have to play ball with everybody else because they're Leica.
It does feel like the market is really probably only big enough for one brand like that. I mean, maybe there could be two, but not everyone can play that game. But Leica is in the position of being that brand, and it works for them because not everyone does it.
Yeah, and I do want to kind of get into their their lines of cameras, but on this topic that we're on now, they are a member of the L-Mount Alliance. It's like big members, obviously DJI, but big members are Leica, Sigma, and Panasonic.
Yeah,
and I mean, if you're thinking of your school project, is Leica a good team member to have on the project? I feel like they're that guy that's like, okay, I'm gonna do my part, and they did like 10% of their part, but it's like the most perfect 10%, and it's like, you're doing great work, but you are mismanaging like how much time you need to spend on the whole scale of the thing, and you're just doing like you're optimizing for quality over like the whole scale of the project.
It's hard to say though, because I think that they're kind of the halo car of L-Mount.
That's true.
And I think that can be appealing to people if you're wanting to buy into that mount. You might think, today I'm buying a Panasonic and I'm using Sigma lenses on it, but I have this future upgrade potential where I could get a Leica lens or camera, and use it on that, like it'll work with my existing stuff. And maybe even just the thought that is possible is appealing to some people.
Maybe it does. They feel like such polar opposites, Panasonic and Leica.
Yeah, but L-Mount isn't even the first time that they've sort of partnered in that way, because...
Well, yeah, they've been making those deluxe cameras forever.
Even on Micro Four Thirds, some of the best Micro Four Thirds lenses were actually basically Leica branded, Leica designed lenses. And those were excellent lenses. And I think on Micro Four Thirds, it kind of had that same appeal where... okay, I'm going to start with Micro Four Thirds and I'm buying a $200 lens. It's definitely not a Leica lens, but I know that if I want to, I could spend $900 on a lens or $1,500 on a lens, and I could get this Leica designed like super lens. And maybe that makes the system more appealing to me, because that's an option for future me that has more money.
I've always wanted to be that monster that puts like a $6,000 Leica lens on an S5 Mark II.
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Leica as a brand. I like that they're the the pinnacle of photography or whatever. Even though if you take any of their cameras in isolation and consider them against, I don't know, like an A7 IV, it's kind of like I don't know. Is this really as good?
Yeah. Here's a question for you: if Leica didn't exist, which brand do you think would have that premium?
That prestige?
Yeah.
Ooh, boy.
Hard question, isn't it?
I mean, Canon would want to be it, but Canon's a mass market brand. It would have to be niche. I don't know if anyone else would necessarily step up into that. I don't think it would be Fuji.
Yeah, I mean, because Fuji does have GFX. I
always thought it would be cool to have, like, maybe in a different world, Carl Zeiss.
Carl Zeus.
That's the knockoff brand, Daniel. But Zeiss could have stepped up into that kind of thing because I mean their optics have been historically good.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's kind of a similar thing where the lenses would be excellent, and then the camera would just need to be good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it just always feels like that. Leica at the foremost is an optics company, and they're all about doing things mechanically the best, but they're in a digital space.
Yeah,
and it makes it so kind of counter to what you would expect of like, well, what are the best specs? And it's like they're never going to have the best specs.
I do think they've done well about adding value, even on the electronics, adding value in certain places that other brands aren't touching. I mean, you mentioned like the wireless charging and the internal storage. Those are pretty obvious ideas. Anyone could do them, but like, why hasn't Sony made a camera that does that? You know, there's no reason.
It would just make it more expensive.
Yeah.
And it would be, those are features that people are like, well, I could just put an SD card in it, or, why I can just swap the battery. Why do I want this? Those feel like luxury features.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so let me talk about their lines of cameras because I feel like you probably don't even know what they are.
Yeah, only a few.
Honestly, I have not really kept a good track of like, I know that they have like M11s and M6s and Qs and SL, but I didn't know like how they really break out their brands.
It's kind of hard to want to track something that is just so far out of your price range, but here we are.
A little bit. So the M6, which came out in 2022, is a 35mm film camera. And I think that M6 line is just their film camera line. They've been making M6s for a good long time.
And even though it's film, the cameras are still really expensive, right?
Oh yeah, it's like a $5,000 or $6,000. Yeah, like $5,000 or $6,000 camera. But I mean, like that's the film camera that you want. Like
it's at least the film camera you want.
You definitely. I hope that they come out with a new version of the M6 just for their 100-year anniversary. I think that would be fantastic. Be super cool. So they still make that. One of the very few companies that are making film cameras. I would hope that Leica always makes film cameras. That would be. It feels like that would be uncharacteristic of them to kill their film line.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
Then they have their M11 line, which one of the rumors this year is that we might see an M12.
Oh,
I don't know, but that's their rangefinder line,
and
which is
a digital camera.
It is a digital camera. Yeah. And I mean, when I think of Leica, I think of rangefinders. That is their bread and butter, in my opinion. Yeah. And it's like you have the M11, the M6, and the Q, and those are all rangefinders. And it's just one's fixed lens, one's film, and one's digital.
Easy enough. I like the simplicity.
Easy. And they all have like the Q and the M11 all have the same megapixel sensor in it. Did you know that the M11 series camera in the viewfinder, it doesn't have a digital viewfinder like the X100V where you can like swap between the two, but it has frame guides. And if you put on a different lens, like say you put on a 50mm lens, it'll show you the frame guide for the 50, but then it'll also show you the crop sizes. Oh. Because like, you know how on the Q3 you can shoot in like 60 megapixel mode or 30 or 17, and those are like 3 different crop values.
Right.
You can do that on the M11, and it shows you the frame guides based upon the lens that you have on there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Super cool. Something that's just well thought out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there are three or four lines of M11 cameras. And I was like, what's the difference between the M11 and the M11P? Because like one's $9,000 and one's like $9,400. I'm like, what's the difference? And it's like you have a nicer display and like more internal storage.
Oh, okay. I mean, if you're spending $9,000, pony up the extra $400.
Sure. Yep. And then they have a monochrome version. Like always make the monochrome version. And then they have an M11D, which came out last September. The M11D is the most expensive version of the M11. Do you know why?
I have no idea.
The M11D doesn't have a screen.
So it obviously costs more money.
It costs more money. It has internal storage, but like no screen.
So you just have this non-digital viewfinder.
Optical viewfinder. And it's like, it is a digital film camera, basically.
Wow. That's the purest Leica.
It sure is. Can you imagine?
I can't.
That's like the dream for me.
How much does it cost?
It's roughly? Like $9,400 or something.
Man.
I think it's like one's $8,900, one's like $9,000, and like $92 and $94 or something like that.
Too much.
But it's like $200 more than any of the other M11s.
Wow.
Because it has less features.
It's probably just because they made fewer of them.
I'm just imagine like in Germany, and they're like, what if we took out the screen? I love it. It's such a good idea.
Let's charge more.
But how much, like, what do we do? We're like, we're going to cut the price? Like, no, we'll make it more expensive.
It's now more valuable.
ridiculous. Anyway, so like that's their rangefinder line. We talked about the M6. The Q is their fixed lens cameras. We all know about those. They have a SOFAR, which is essentially blah, 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 the Instax.
I think I showed that to you one time because that is like shocking that a Leica branded camera could be as affordable as it was.
I mean, it's the luxury brand, right? Like you're just going to go out and you have your Q3 and you got to have your Instax.
Yeah, obviously.
They have the SL, which we touched on a little bit last week, but they have the SL3, which is the 60.3 megapixel sensor. And then they recently released the SL3-S, which is exactly an S5 Mark II, but it has a CF Express card slot.
Is it really that similar?
It is the same sensor, basically the same camera, but it costs $2,000 more.
Awesome.
And I just don't know what to do with that. Like
I don't know what to say.
This is the segment where we're supposed to talk about the SL3-S, and it's like, cool camera. You added like one or two more features over the S5 Mark II. It's way more money because it's a Leica, but it's not like it's just the same. It's just the same camera.
I mean, it seems like it's for people that are not going to comparison shop Panasonic and Leica, and instead they want a Leica, but they don't want to pay Leica money, and so they get that, which is still Leica money, but it's less Leica money.
This is like the perfect example of what I find is the conundrum of Leica. I absolutely understand an M11D that has no screen, an optical viewfinder, and costs $9,400. I'm like, sign me up.
You can see why somebody would want that camera.
Yep. But then you take that exact same sensor and you put it in a DSLR body style and you call it the SL3. I'm like, why would I buy this when I could buy for cheaper an R5 Mark II?
Yep.
And I just I always have trouble squaring that. This SL3-S, I don't know why it exists.
I think it's a fair question. It feels like it's not as Leica as most of Leica's cameras.
The whole SL line feels like they needed a interchangeable lens SL type camera line because they feel like they need it. But I don't know how many people are actually buying SL cameras. To me, I mean, that's like the L mount camera, right? But I mean, I don't know. Like, why wouldn't you just go with the M series? Yeah. Why wouldn't you go with the rangefinder?
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I mean, they must sell enough of them to keep updating the lines, keep making new ones, but it is a little weird.
Yeah. And then they have the S line, which has not been renewed in quite a while. The last one was the S3, and this is their medium format. And the last one was a DSLR, and that was like a 30x45 sensor, so slightly smaller than GFX, but it was the Leica medium format.
Okay.
And that's kind of like falls into the rumors of Leica, of like, what are they going to do? They have this old medium format line that is like, if you switch to mirrorless, which they should, in my opinion, like now you don't have any lenses for it. All your lenses were DSLR lenses. So they're going to have to roll out like a whole new lens mount. I mean, maybe you have like L plus mount or something? Like,
do you think
larger
L mount? Do you think they would just put the same DSLR mount on, or do you think they wouldn't do that because of the image quality compromise?
I'm sure that they would adapt it. You don't think you can get around doing that, but I think that they have to do a new lens mount.
Interesting.
Or maybe you can slap PLs on there. That'd be crazy.
That'd be interesting.
I mean, does PL cover? PL doesn't cover that size. They can do like Premista. That would be huge. Yeah. They could coordinate with Fuji and use GFX lenses.
What does Hasselblad do? Do they have their own?
Yeah, they have like H mount or something silly.
Yeah, so Leica probably wouldn't use that.
It just seems like the kind of thing that Leica would maybe want to collaborate with someone, but there's not a lot of players in the medium format market, and I can't imagine like already a niche brand then developing a whole new lens mount ecosystem for like.
It is hard to picture.
It's hard to picture. I could see them doing like a Q style camera in medium format, kind of like the new rumored Fuji GFX 100 or whatever it's called.
Could be interesting. Sounds expensive, but could be interesting.
But like that's kind of one of the rumors that's just out there. Is Leica going to do an S4, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a niche of a niche, so it's hard to say.
I mean, do you think they should?
Honestly, I just don't imagine people buying that with all the other options out there. You know, why wouldn't you get GFX? Why wouldn't you get the Hasselblad digital thing? It feels like they'd sell 3 of them.
Maybe. Or, I mean, if it's price, I feel like they could price it higher than the Fuji.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, within reason. But how expensive would it get, though? That's what I wonder.
I mean, they're already charging $9,000 for the rangefinders. $12,000, $13,000. I don't know.
That's true.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The other things that are possible that are rumored is maybe we get a new M12. People have been asking to put IBIS in the M11 series for a good long time. Leica says things such as, I was trying not to say like.
Yeah, you've said it many times during the show. I'm sure people are very confused.
Well, we're all confused. Leica says they can't fit it in there. They're like, the camera's too big. But the rumor's like, maybe they make it smaller. Maybe they add IBIS. It's like, IBIS. There's also a rumor that they might put a digital viewfinder in there, kind of like your X100-6.
Okay. So there's a couple of things there.
Couple things. We'll see. And then maybe we get the Q3 monochrome.
Yeah, which that's probably the least exciting thing on the list, just because the Q3 already exists. The monochrome's just kind of a special version of that, but it wouldn't be surprising to see. They always seem to do that.
Yeah. So is there anything that you want to see from Leica? I mean, it feels like Leica's going to Leica.
I think they're doing their own thing. It's not something that's really in my budget, but I appreciate that they're out there. And I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't watch their stuff super closely. Maybe if I did, I'd have like some specific, very specific thing I want to see. But I like that they're out there, and it's kind of this halo car of cameras. And, I'll probably never own one, but I think it's cool.
To me, I think that the biggest challenge for Leica is balancing high end with high end. That they want to be this premium camera brand, but they don't always have the most premium camera technology.
Yeah. The technology sides, maybe would give some people pause.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a lot easier to like them if they had the best sensors.
Right. It's like, as a camera enthusiast, you want it to have the coolest, best specs, because, oh wow, this is a $9,000 camera. Like, what do you get for that? And it's like, you get 4-year-old camera technology that was in like 3 Sonys ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's just always going to be the challenge for them, is they're an optics company, not a technology company, and being able to strike the balance between what is like the best technology they can put in their cameras versus what is the best German engineering that they can do. And I think that they've been doing a good enough job at that recently, but I mean, you add 5 years to it, that's 60 megapixel. That 60 megapixel sensor is going to get old, and like they're going to have to refresh all these lines and do something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, at some point you're paying enough for a camera, you'll accept some amount of being behind on the technology, but there's a limit, right? Like you're not going to accept that forever.
I want the next. I mean, maybe people would think of it as a step down because of the resolution drop, but I would want them to start doing something like the 50 megapixel backside illuminated sensor that's in the A1 and the A1 II. And maybe Sony could bring that to the Leica system, or like sell that to Leica in the next couple of years. As that's what's kind of the top of the line right now. Maybe we see something like that in the Leica system in the future.
Be interesting.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, we'll watch them as they all come out, but I would just assume that Leica's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Unlike Pentax.
You really want to talk about Pentax, don't you?
We have to, Daniel. We got to just chew through it.
All right. Well, let's take a break, and then we'll talk about Pentax. We'll be back in just a moment, but we wanted to let you know that if you'd like to support the show, you can now subscribe to us on Patreon. It helps cover our hosting costs so we can keep the show running, and you might find an occasional behind-the-scenes post on there, like some photos we've taken recently or a mini review of some new gear. If you're interested, you can find us at patreon.com/cameragearpodcast.
I should technically say this is Pentax /Ricoh, with Ricoh being the big word and Pentax being the small word.
But you like Pentax more.
But I like Pentax more. They're older than Leica. They were founded in 1919.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep. Did you know? Are you familiar with Hoya?
Yeah, I'm sure I have a UV filter from them somewhere.
They owned Pentax for like 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from 2007 to like 2011.
That didn't last very long.
No, not really. They then spun Pentax off again and sold it to Ricoh, and it's been under Ricoh ever since. And I just don't know what they're doing or why they exist. It just seems like Pentax kind of, like, they have a loyal fan base for the people who like their cameras. And I mean, I love their film cameras. You know, like the 6.7 and the 6.45 and all the, like, the old,
the legacy film cameras.
Yeah, like the old film cameras. I mean, I love my Pentax 17 as well.
Yeah, and that one kind of is. That's kind of a category of its own.
Definitely a category of its own. But ignoring that new camera, and it's like Pentax says, okay, we want to be the DSLR company that's still making DSLRs. But all their lenses are so old, but also so cheap. Like you can get like a 24 to 72.8 for like $600 used.
I mean, I think the question I have about them with DSLRs is, why would I want a Pentax DSLR instead of getting like a Canon 5D Mark IV?
Honestly, that's a really good question. I would say, or maybe even a 1DX.
Yeah. I mean, pick your price range here, but like, why wouldn't I get a, good Nikon or Canon?
Like a D850? That thing is still an amazing camera.
Yeah.
5D Mark V. Did they make a Mark V or just a Mark IV?
I think just a Mark IV.
Yeah. Those are all amazing DSLRs. Still amazing DSLRs. I don't know if they're better than, I don't know if Pentax's cameras are better than that. Yeah. Pentax's cameras
the thing is, like, maybe, when both these cameras were new, maybe the Pentax had some features, that were better, or maybe they were cheaper, or maybe the lenses were cheaper. But if you're comparing it to something like, let's just say a 1DX or a 5D Mark IV, like, if you're buying a used camera, I feel like your money's going to get you pretty far. Like, getting a 1DX is probably going to be better than most of these Pentax DSLRs. And then you're getting used EF mount glass, which maybe isn't super cheap, but it's probably not crazy expensive either. I wonder if the value is still there on stuff like this.
I think it is if you start buying like used stuff and that sort of thing. I was trying to remember what the last Nikon DSLR camera was.
I thought it was the D850.
It's not the D850. There's one that came just after that. It was like supposed to be even better, but I think that the D850 is the one that we all remember because that was an amazing camera. And if you look at Pentax's line, they essentially have the K1, that's their high megapixel fancy pants camera. Then they have the K3, that's supposed to be their mid-range, and then they have the KF, which replaced the K70, and that's their APS-C. And if you look at the K1, which is from 2019, it's a 6-year-old camera, the K1 Mark II. It's like a 33 megapixel sensor. I mean, you can buy it like new for $1,600 now, but if you went out and bought a D850, it has a higher megapixel sensor, and it's probably a better camera.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough because they're still competing with these used DSLRs because they're not really keeping their lines up to date.
Yeah.
The K3 Mark III came out in 2021. And that one was discontinued outside of the U.S. like this past week.
Oh, and that one's 26 megapixel?
Yeah, that's like a 26 megapixel. It's backside illuminated, like it's a decent sensor. I do think there's still a place for DSLRs. Some people just prefer to see through the lens.
Yeah.
And I get it. It is a different experience. Kind of like it's the Leica thing, right? Where you are looking through a rangefinder and you're seeing the world that you're taking a picture of, and you're not necessarily like pre-composing it or seeing it as digital. And I get that there's still a place for that. And I think that there is a reason that you might want a SLR style camera, but I don't like Pentax is just not keeping up with it. It's not like go to Pentax and you can get a cool modern version of a DSLR. It's like, no, most of their cameras are basically 5 to 10-year-old technology that's they're keeping on a respirator.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. If they were making new stuff, it would be appealing in a certain way, but at this point I feel like they're competing against used Canons and Nikons.
It does feel like that. And they released two new lenses last year. I almost said sensors. 2 new lenses last year, and they were just like redone primes, like lenses that they had before. They changed a couple components and they just re-released them as like fan editions or something.
That sounds like they're trying to maximize their profit with minimizing their investment.
A little bit. Like there is maybe to an extent, like they are still maybe doing stuff. Like they made a new film camera, brand whole new film camera.
Oh yeah, I mean the Pentax 17 is an impressive product and like a bold move. And I mean I'm not putting that in the same category, but I don't understand these DSLRs.
And like there is some rumor that okay, they discontinued the K3, they're making room in their lineup for a new camera, and like I feel like that's what we need to breathe more life into Pentax. Is like come out with a new camera, come out with a new design of something that isn't just a K3 Mark II, but with a few new things in it.
Yeah, I agree.
We need like a K3 Mark IV or a K1 Mark III. Some sort of, to me, what I want to see out of Pentax is a high megapixel modern DSLR.
It feels like an OM system thing right now, where until something new comes out, my inclination is to treat them as like a has been. You know, like why would I even care about this company anymore? They're clearly dying. What's the deal? So
it's frustrating because it seems like they are doing things and they are selling cameras and there are people who are fans of them, and like I would love to see them turn around, but it just feels like for the last, I don't know, call it 5 years, there just hasn't been much movement.
Kind of off the radar. I think the Pentax 17 was kind of, whoa, wait, Pentax is still making stuff?
Yeah, a little bit. So I don't know, like what I want from them. I mean, the rumors that they're like, maybe they come out with a new K1, maybe we haven't talked about the Ricoh stuff. Like maybe there's a GR, maybe there's another film camera, but that's kind of like basically it. There's not like a lens roadmap or anything along those lines. And so
concerning.
I don't know. What I want to see from Pentax is anything, like literally anything.
Literally anything. You want to see a Pentax 35?
I would love to see. I want to see some K series Pentax that has the same version in 35 millimeter film and be able to mount their lens, like the same lens mount as their digital camera.
That'd
to
be kind
it.
of cool.
That's what I want to see. And I mean, it would be super, super neat.
Yeah.
It'd be super neat to see a film camera with phase detect autofocus. I
It
don't even know how you do that.
It'd be pretty cool.
It's like, I don't even think that's possible.
You'd have to put a sensor in it in addition to the film.
Or it'd have to be like off axis or something, or you'd have to have like two to the side.
That would be weird.
I don't know how. It'd be interesting. Anyways, I don't know. The only other Pentax thing that's come out last year was this WG-8, which is essentially, like some of those like waterproof tough cameras or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's basically a Ricoh, what do they call it? Ricoh has the same camera, and it's like here's
a G900.
Yeah, something like that, and it's just the same. It's the same thing with a Pentax name on it.
Yeah, man, it kind of bugs me when companies do that. I hate that, like the rebadging. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it is a little weird, especially since they have both Pentax and Ricoh as camera brands. Ricoh used to make a 360 camera.
Yeah, you have it, don't you?
Yeah, I have a Ricoh 360 camera. They haven't made a new one since 2017.
Yeah, it's like a one and done kind of thing.
They just kind of stopped doing that.
I mean, honestly, Insta360 probably stole that market from them.
Yep. They essentially have the GR line and then their WG line.
Yeah. And the GR line has gotten pretty popular, especially with the the X100 series from Fuji getting so popular. And I think the GR line kind of fills a niche in being actually small enough to be pocketable.
For sure. It feels like there are just a few things that Pentax Ricoh are doing that people still want. And my impression thus far has been they're just surprised that people still want their products.
But like the Pentax 17 clearly was a decent engineering investment. It wasn't thrown together. So there's some heat behind what they're doing, but it's almost weird that they haven't done more.
I just hope that it's more of a sign of what's coming and a spark or a fire that's coming out of that company from maybe what was a bit of a husk of their former self kind of thing, where they were releasing a few things here and there, but mostly it seemed like who wants a Pentax camera, who wants a Ricoh camera, and then all of a sudden everybody wants a GR something, and there's people who miss having DSLR and are starting to look for those kind of cameras and who's making new versions of it, and now this excitement back into film, maybe that's a growth area for them. So.
I mean, it seems like the most promising thing so far because the DSLR thing while you're right, I think they could kind of, come back if they release something new. It really feels like an uphill battle. I mean, they have to convince people to go with the DSLR over mirrorless cameras, which most people are not going to do. And then they're also fighting against the entire used market of Canon and Nikon. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, on the film stuff, it feels like that's where they're really doing something new that nobody else is doing in the same way. So as weird as it is to say film is their future, it kind of feels that way to me.
If they can keep investing in making new products with warranties that are supported, the old stuff will eventually die off and stop working and stop being supported, and the lenses will all break or whatever. Maybe. I mean, we have 40, 50 years of film stuff that's still in use, but it seems like, Pentax could be that company of like, maybe they have one DSLR, they have film cameras, and they can essentially do what Leica's doing and focus on the experience of the photos and these niche categories of here's a portable camera.
Yeah.
Here's a camera that is trying to get out of your way as much as possible. And like you're seeing the world through the lens, and you're not in this like digital landscape and where everything's filters and screens and all this sort of stuff, but you're just like, there's nothing separating you from the experience of taking the photo. And it seems that if Pentax can really lean into that as like a brand, it kind of marries the film and the DSLR concepts a little bit.
Man, I think you should do marketing with them with phrases like "there's nothing between you and the." What did you say? It's nothing between you and the lens.
I don't know. They should say you and the photography, because that would be good. I don't know. That's what I want to see from them. I don't know if they'll do it, but they could. With the right marketing push and the right camera releases, I think Pentax could be back.
It's interesting to me that we talked about them the same week as Leica, because they seem like very different companies. But I think what I'm seeing from this discussion is that really they're kind of both similar in the way that Leica is able to succeed because there's no one else doing what they do. And there's not really another premium brand quite like them. And Pentax, it seems like what you're saying is that to survive, they kind of need to become unique and try to not do exactly what the other brands are doing, and find something that sets them apart. And they have to be the only company doing that, like in order to carve out enough of a niche.
Right, exactly. They can't try to compete with high-end digital mirrorless. Yeah. But that's not why people are going to buy a DSLR. Mm-hmm. They're going to buy it because you can get a leaf shunner in it that can sync at flash speeds over 250th of a second. Or like the fact that it just doesn't have, you're not looking through an EVF, right? They need to focus on those key differentiators, but then also still have some of the critical things that make it high end, basically. They need a 24 megapixel version like the K3, like a K3 Mark IV or something that is like a good backside illuminated 26 megapixel, whatever. But I still think that they need a 40 plus megapixel, like actual flagship K1 type camera.
Yeah. I think you would need that to take them seriously.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's not like they can just have the one camera, but I think that they could have two cameras, lean on their full frame lenses, and do things that the mirrorless systems can't or won't, and just be different.
Yeah, just be different.
Easy.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah, that's all you have to do.
I don't know if I really have anything else to add. I think you talked more on Pentax than I expected you to be able to. I thought you'd just talk about the Pentax 17 the whole time. But
we barely even got to the Pentax 17.
I know. You kind of just danced around that because every other episode of this podcast is about that camera.
I still have to shoot like 20 more pictures, and then I can develop both my rules of film. I just have to shoot like 20 more photos.
Just 20 more.
That's it. Easy.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us, and if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter at CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.